Early life and childhood Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, was born in the holy city of Mecca around the year 570 CE. This year was remembered in Arabia as the Year of the Elephant, when a great army led by Abraham attempted to destroy the Kaaba, but was miraculously defeated. His birth carried both historical significance and divine protection, marking the beginning of a life that would change the course of human history. He was born into the noble Quraysh tribe, one of the most respected tribes of Mecca. His family belonged to the clan of Banu Hashim, a branch known for its honor and guardianship of the Kaaba. His father was Abdullah, the son of Abdul Muttalib, and his mother was Amina bint Wahb. Even before his birth, hardship struck, as his father Abdullah passed away while on a journey for trade. The young Muhammad entered the world as an orphan of his father, a child who would face many trials yet remain destined for greatness. From the moment of his birth, signs of his special future were noticed by those around him. His grandfather Abdul Muttalib welcomed him with joy and named him Muhammad, a name that was uncommon in Arabia at the time. The name carried the meaning of the praised one, and it suited the noble qualities that he would later embody. His early years, however, were marked by both care and loss. When he was still a child, his mother Amina took him to visit her family in Yathrib, later known as Medina. On the return journey, she fell ill and passed away, leaving Muhammad an orphan of both parents by the age of 6. After the loss of his mother, young Muhammad was taken into the guardianship of his grandfather Abdul Muttalib. The old man loved him dearly and treated him with kindness and respect. He would sit the boy beside him during important meetings, showing his affection in a way unusual for tribal leaders of that time. Yet this comfort was short-lived, for only 2 years later, Abdul Muttalib also passed away. Muhammad, now 8 years old, came under the care of his uncle Abu Talib. Though Abu Talib was not wealthy, he was compassionate and protective. He raised his nephew with great care and later stood by him during the most difficult years of his mission. As a child and youth, Muhammad was known for his gentle nature, honesty, and thoughtfulness. He lived in a society filled with idol worship, harsh customs, and divisions based on wealth and status. Yet he never engaged in the wrong practices that were common among his people. He disliked falsehood, injustice, and cruelty, and he was respected for his upright character even at a young age. He spent part of his early life among the desert tribes, living with a foster mother named Halima Sa'adiyah. This was a common custom in Arabia, as it allowed children to grow strong in the clean desert environment and learn the pure Arabic language. During his time with Halima's family, Muhammad was treated with affection, and blessings were noticed in their household after his arrival. Their animals grew healthier and their livelihood improved, which they attributed to the presence of the blessed child growing up under Abu Talib's protection. Muhammad began to take responsibility at an early age. To contribute to his family's livelihood, he worked as a shepherd, caring for sheep and goats in the valleys around Mecca. This humble work developed qualities of patience, responsibility, and care for the weak, lessons that would later reflect in his leadership of people. He also accompanied his uncle on trade journeys, traveling with caravans and observing the world beyond Mecca. These experiences exposed him to different cultures, customs, and beliefs, and they widened his understanding of humanity. As Muhammad grew into youth, he became known for his honesty and trustworthiness. In a society where cheating and dishonesty in trade were common, he stood apart as a man who never deceived. The people of Mecca gave him the title Al-Amin, meaning the trustworthy, and they often chose him to safeguard their valuables or to resolve disputes. His character shone with integrity, and he never worshipped idols or participated in corrupt practices. This purity of conduct was one of the signs of his future prophethood. When he reached his mid-20s, Muhammad began to engage more deeply in trade. His reputation for honesty attracted the attention of Khadijah, a wealthy and respected businesswoman of Mecca. She hired him to manage her trade caravans, and he proved himself as a skilled and fair merchant. Upon his return from one of these journeys, Khadijah was so impressed by his noble character that she proposed marriage. Their marriage was filled with respect, trust, and love, and it provided Muhammad with stability and support. Khadijah was not only his wife but his closest companion, standing by him in times of ease and in times of hardship. Together they raised a family, and their home became a place of kindness and generosity. Despite his growing responsibilities, Muhammad remained a man of reflection. He often withdrew from the noise and materialism of Meccan society, seeking solitude in the hills and caves that surrounded the city. Among these retreats, the cave of Hira on Mount Nur became his favorite place of meditation. Here he would spend nights in deep thought and worship, pondering the mysteries of creation and seeking truth beyond the idol worship and injustice that surrounded him. He felt a deep yearning for guidance, a sense that there was a higher purpose to life and a need for divine direction. This quiet and thoughtful period of his life prepared him for the great mission that was soon to come. By the age of 40, Muhammad was known as the most trustworthy, kind, and respected man in Mecca. People turned to him for advice, for help in settling disputes, and for safeguarding their possessions. Yet in his heart, he longed for something greater, a truth that would bring justice to the oppressed, compassion to the suffering, and guidance to those lost in the darkness of ignorance. It was during one of his retreats in the cave of Hira that his life and the history of humanity would change forever with the first revelation. The first revelation and the early call at the age of 40, Muhammad PBUH often withdrew to the cave of Hira on Mount Nur. Just outside Mecca, he would spend long nights in solitude, reflecting on the state of his people and the signs of creation around him. Mecca was a city of wealth and power, yet it was also filled with injustice, idol worship, and neglect of the weak. The poor were oppressed, orphans were abandoned, and slavery was common. Muhammad longed for truth and guidance that could bring peace and justice to his society. It was during one of these retreats in the month of Ramadan that his life changed forever. While he sat alone in the cave, an angel suddenly appeared before him. It was Jibril, known in English as Gabriel, the angel of revelation. The angel spoke with authority, commanding him to read or recite. Muhammad, unlettered and unable to read, replied that he could not. The angel embraced him tightly and repeated the command. After this occurred 3 times, the angel recited the first verses of the Quran. Recite in the name of your Lord, who created man from a clot. Recite, and your Lord is the most generous, who taught by the pen, taught man what he did not know. Shaken and trembling, Muhammad hurried back to his home. He sought comfort in his wife Khadijah, telling her of the extraordinary event. Fearful that he might have been harmed or deceived, he confided in her with deep emotion. Khadijah comforted him and reassured him that his character was too noble to be led astray. She reminded him of his kindness to the poor, his honesty, and his care for family and strangers alike. She then took him to her cousin Waraqah ibn Nawfal, a learned man who had studied earlier scriptures. Waraqah listened carefully to Muhammad's account and declared that this was the same angel who had come to Moses, the angel of revelation. He warned that the people of Mecca would oppose Muhammad fiercely, but he affirmed that Muhammad had been chosen as a prophet of God. This marked the beginning of Muhammad's prophethood. The revelations continued, first slowly, then more regularly, guiding him with words of truth and wisdom. They called for the worship of the one true God, the creator of the heavens and the earth. They called for justice, compassion, honesty, and care for the poor. At first, Muhammad shared this message quietly, beginning with those closest to him. Khadijah was the first to accept Islam, followed by his young cousin Ali, his loyal friend Abu Bakr, and his servant Zayd ibn Haritha. These early believers formed a small but dedicated group, united by their faith in the oneness of God and the truth of Muhammad's mission. The small community grew slowly but steadily. Abu Bakr, known for his gentle character and respected position in Mecca, invited others to the new faith. Through his influence, notable figures such as Uthman ibn Affan, Abdurrahman ibn Auf, Talha ibn Ubaidullah, and Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas accepted Islam. These men would later become among the closest companions of the Prophet. The message appealed strongly to the poor, the weak and the oppressed, for it promised equality and dignity in a society that had long neglected them. Slaves like Bilal ibn Rabah, an Abyssinian man, found hope and strength in the message of Islam. As the message spread, the leaders of Quraysh grew alarmed. They had long profited from the system of idol worship and the trade connected to the Kaaba, where tribes from across Arabia came to offer sacrifices. Muhammad's call to worship one God alone threatened their power and wealth. At first, they dismissed him as a dreamer or a poet. But as more people accepted Islam, their opposition hardened. They began to insult him, mock him, and try to discredit his teachings. They spread lies about him, calling him a sorcerer who divided families. Despite the opposition, Muhammad continued to preach with patience and wisdom. He never raised his voice in anger, nor did he respond to cruelty with cruelty. He reminded his followers to remain steadfast and to trust in God's promise. The Quran, revealed at this time, strengthened their faith, with verses that spoke of God's greatness, the certainty of the day of judgment, and the importance of moral conduct. The believers would gather quietly in the house of a companion named Al-Arqam, where they would pray together, learn the Quran, and strengthen their resolve. When open opposition became stronger, the Quraysh resorted to harsher measures. They pressured Abu Talib to abandon his protection of Muhammad, but Abu Talib refused out of loyalty to his nephew. They mocked the Prophet in public, scattered thorns in his path, and even threw dirt on him while he prayed. Yet he bore these insults with patience, raising his hands only to pray for their guidance. The Quraysh also targeted the weak and poor Muslims. Bilal, the Abyssinian slave, was tortured by his master, who forced him to lie on hot sand under the blazing sun, with heavy stones placed on his chest. Yet Bilal endured, repeating only one word, Ahad, meaning one, affirming his belief in the one God. The suffering grew so severe that Muhammad advised some of his followers to migrate to Abyssinia, a Christian kingdom ruled by a just king known as the Negus. There, they found safety and were allowed to practice their faith freely. This was the first migration in Islam, and it showed the Prophet's concern for the well-being of his followers. He himself, however, remained in Mecca, continuing to deliver the message despite the hostility around him. During this period of struggle, Muhammad's personal life also brought him both comfort and sorrow. Khadijah remained his greatest supporter, offering him encouragement and love when the opposition seemed overwhelming. Her faith and loyalty strengthened him in his mission. Abu Talib also continued to protect him, even though he did not accept Islam himself. The support of these two figures allowed Muhammad to endure the hardships he faced. As the years passed, the Quraysh grew more determined to silence the Prophet. They imposed a social and economic boycott on him and his clan, forcing them into a narrow valley on the outskirts of Mecca. There, the Muslims suffered hunger and hardship for several years, with little access to food or trade. Yet even in the face of such suffering, the believers remained steadfast. They supported one another with patience, sharing what little they had and continuing to trust in God's mercy. Through these trials, Muhammad's character shone brightly. He remained calm, patient, and compassionate, never abandoning his mission or lashing out in anger. His example inspired his followers to remain firm, and his message continued to attract new believers despite the risks. The Quran continued to reveal verses of comfort, encouragement, and warning, reminding the Muslims that truth would prevail and that God was with those who remained patient. By this stage, Islam had become a growing force in Mecca, no longer a small gathering, but a movement that could not be ignored. The Quraysh realized that their old methods of mockery and boycott were not enough. Their hostility would soon grow even fiercer, leading to events that tested the Prophet and his companions more than ever before. Yet through it all, Muhammad remained unwavering, carrying the light of revelation with dignity and strength. The year of sorrow, night journey, and migration. The years in Mecca were filled with both hardship and steadfastness. The small Muslim community had endured ridicule, persecution, and a long boycott that brought hunger and suffering. Yet the greatest test for the Prophet Muhammad came in what became known as the Year of Sorrow. During this time, he faced the loss of two of the people who had supported him the most. His beloved wife Khadijah passed away, leaving him in deep grief. She had been his closest companion, the first to believe in his mission, and the source of comfort through every trial. Her death left a painful emptiness in his heart. Not long after, his uncle Abu Talib also passed away. Though Abu Talib had never accepted Islam, he had always protected his nephew from the hostility of the Quraysh. With his death, Muhammad lost the shield that had given him safety from his enemies. The Quraysh now felt free to increase their attacks against him. They mocked him more openly, insulted him, and even plotted to harm him physically. With his sadness deepened and his protection weakened, Muhammad turned to new possibilities of spreading the message. He traveled to the nearby city of Taif, hoping that its people might listen and accept Islam. Instead, he was met with harsh rejection. The leaders mocked him, and the people sent children into the streets to throw stones at him until he bled. Exhausted and wounded, he found shelter in a garden, where he raised his hands to his Lord in prayer. He asked not for revenge, but for mercy and guidance. His words showed his deep humility, for even in his pain, he placed his trust in God alone. This journey to Taif, though bitter, became a sign of his resilience and his unwavering reliance on the mercy of God. It was after these painful experiences that Allah granted him a miracle to strengthen his heart. This was the Isra and Miraj, the night journey and ascension. One night, while resting near the Kaaba, the angel Jibril came to him. He was taken on a miraculous journey, riding the Burak, a creature of extraordinary speed. First he traveled from Mecca to Jerusalem, where he led the other prophets in prayer at Al-Aqsa Mosque, showing his role as the final messenger who continued their mission. Then he was raised through the heavens, where he met prophets such as Adam, Moses, and Jesus. At the highest point, he was brought into the divine presence and received the command of 5 daily prayers, which would become the central act of worship for Muslims. This journey was a source of immense comfort, reminding him of his honored position and strengthening him for the challenges ahead. Back in Mecca, the situation continued to worsen. The Quraysh tried to block his mission at every turn, but Islam was beginning to spread beyond their control. During the pilgrimage season, when tribes from all over Arabia came to Mecca, Muhammad would approach them and present the message of Islam. Many rejected him, but among the visitors were people from Yathrib, a city to the north. They listened to his words with open hearts and accepted Islam. The following year, more people from Yathrib returned and pledged their loyalty to him. They invited him to their city, promising to support him and protect him. This became known as the Pledge of Aqaba, a turning point that opened the door for a new home for the Muslims. With this pledge, Islam now had a community ready to embrace it. The Prophet instructed his followers to migrate to Yathrib, which would later be called Medina, the city of the Prophet. One by one, the Muslims left Mecca quietly, escaping the watchful eyes of the Quraysh. When the leaders of Quraysh realized what was happening, they grew fearful that Muhammad himself would also leave and gain strength with his new supporters. They decided to plot his assassination, planning to strike him together so that no single clan would bear the blame. Allah informed the Prophet of their plan, and he prepared for his migration. On the night of the plot, he asked his young cousin Ali to sleep in his bed as a sign of courage and trust, while he himself slipped away with his close companion Abu Bakr. Together, they set out on the dangerous journey to Medina. The Quraysh, discovering his escape, sent search parties in every direction. At one point, the pursuers came so close that they reached the entrance of the cave where Muhammad and Abu Bakr were hiding. Abu Bakr whispered his fear, but Muhammad reassured him with calm words that God was with them and would never abandon them. A spider spun its web over the entrance, and a bird nested nearby. So the pursuers assumed the cave was empty and passed by without entering. After days of cautious travel, Muhammad and Abu Bakr finally reached Medina, where they were received with joy and celebration. The people of the city, now called the Ansar or helpers, welcomed them warmly. This migration, known as the Hijrah, was not just a physical journey, but the beginning of a new chapter in Islamic history. It marked the establishment of the first Muslim community, where faith, justice, and brotherhood could flourish under the leadership of the Prophet. The Hijrah was so significant that it later became the starting point of the Islamic calendar. Thus ended the long years of hardship in Mecca and began the building of a society in Medina. The Prophet had endured loss, rejection, and persecution, yet he never gave up his mission. Through patience, faith, and courage, he carried the message of Islam from the valleys of Mecca to the hearts of people in a new land. The foundations of the Islamic community were now laid, and greater challenges and victories awaited in the years ahead. Life in Medina and the final years, when Prophet Muhammad PBUH arrived in Medina, the city was filled with joy. Men, women, and children came out to greet him, singing praises and welcoming him with love. This moment marked the beginning of a new era. In Medina, the Prophet was not only a spiritual leader, but also a community guide, a judge, and a statesman. His first task was to build a mosque, which became the center of worship, learning, and community life. The Prophet himself joined in the construction, carrying bricks with his companions, showing his humility and commitment. This mosque, known as Masjid an-Nabawi, became the heart of the new Muslim society. One of the greatest achievements of the Prophet in Medina was establishing brotherhood among the Muslims. He paired the migrants from Mecca, known as the Muhajirun, with the Muslims of Medina, known as the Ansar. This bond of brotherhood was not symbolic but practical, as they shared homes, wealth, and responsibilities. It created unity among people who had once been strangers, and it showed that Islam was building a community based on faith rather than tribe or wealth. The Prophet also established a written agreement known as the Constitution of Medina. This document created harmony between Muslims, Jews, and other groups in the city. It ensured that all communities had rights and responsibilities, and that they would defend the city together if attacked. It was one of the earliest examples of a fair and inclusive society, guided by justice and mutual respect. However, the Quraysh of Mecca did not leave the Muslims in peace. They saw the new community in Medina as a threat to their power. This led to a series of battles between the Muslims and the Quraysh. The first major battle was the Battle of Badr. Though the Muslims were few in number and poorly equipped, their faith was strong. With the help of Allah, they achieved a great victory, which strengthened their position and showed that truth would overcome falsehood. The Quraysh did not accept defeat and returned the following year with a large army. This led to the Battle of Uhud. At first, the Muslims gained the upper hand, but when some archers disobeyed the Prophet's instructions, the enemy countered and the Muslims suffered heavy losses. The Prophet himself was injured, and many companions were martyred. This battle was a lesson in discipline and patience. It reminded the Muslims that victory comes only through obedience to God and His messenger. Some years later, the Quraysh gathered a great alliance of tribes to destroy Medina. This became the Battle of the Trench. Following the Prophet's guidance, the Muslims dug a wide trench around the city, a strategy that the enemy had never seen before. Unable to cross the trench, the Quraysh eventually retreated in frustration. This was a turning point, as it showed that the enemies of Islam could not defeat the Muslims when they stood united. In the 6th year after the Hijrah, The Prophet set out with his companions to perform Umrah in Mecca. The Quraysh stopped them at a place called Hudaybiyah, where a treaty was signed. Though the terms seemed difficult at first, the Treaty of Hudaybiyah brought a period of peace that allowed Islam to spread more widely. Many people entered Islam during this time, seeing the justice and mercy of the Prophet. 2 years later, when the Quraysh broke the treaty, the Prophet marched to Mecca with a large army. Instead of revenge, he entered the city with humility and forgiveness. He declared a general pardon for his former enemies, saying that they were free and safe. The idols around the Kaaba were destroyed, and the house of Allah was purified for the worship of the one true God. The conquest of Mecca was a moment of mercy and victory, showing the greatness of the Prophet's character. After this, Islam spread across Arabia. Tribes sent delegations to Medina, accepting Islam and pledging loyalty. The Prophet taught them about faith, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage. He reminded them that Islam was a religion of justice, mercy, and peace. In the 10th year after the Hijrah, the Prophet performed his only Hajj, known as the farewell pilgrimage. Standing before the great gathering of Muslims, he delivered his farewell sermon. In it, he reminded the people that all humans are equal, whether Arab or non-Arab, white or black. He emphasized the rights of women, the importance of justice, and the sanctity of life and property. He declared that he had conveyed the message, and the people testified that he had fulfilled his duty. With his hands raised to the heavens, he called upon Allah to bear witness. Soon after returning to Medina, the Prophet fell ill. His illness grew more severe, and he spent his final days in the room of his beloved wife Aisha. Despite his weakness, he continued to remind the Muslims to remain steadfast in prayer and to treat one another with kindness. On his last day, he came out to the mosque and smiled at his companions as they prayed, a gesture of love and reassurance. Shortly after, he returned to his room, laid his head on Aisha's lap, and peacefully passed away. The news of his passing filled Medina with grief. His companions wept, unable to believe that their beloved messenger was gone. Abu Bakr stood before them and reminded them with firm words that whoever worshipped Muhammad should know that Muhammad had passed away, but whoever worshipped Allah should know that Allah is ever living and never dies. These words calmed the hearts of the believers and reminded them that the mission of Islam would continue. The Prophet Muhammad, PBUH, was buried in Medina, in the very room where he passed away. His life remains the greatest example of faith, patience, mercy, and leadership. He came as a mercy to mankind, guiding people from darkness to light and leaving behind a legacy that continues to inspire hearts around the world. His story is not just history, but a guiding light for all who seek truth, justice, and peace.